And here he is, former Prime Minister Jean Chretien.
Nice to see you.
Excellent. How are you feeling? You were supposed to be on the show a while back, but then your ticker, what's going on?
Yes, you know, they had to change the plumbing. You know, I have 4 bypass in early October, and I'm in very good shape.
Was you on the golf course when you started to feel it?
Yes, yes, I had a kind of a problem, and I was playing with, not a problem, a malaise, and I was playing with a doctor who was a cardiologist. So I explained to him what he said, I said, I have a little of a problem that I had since a few days. He said, perhaps you should come to get an examination at l'Institut Cardiologie de Montréal. So I went there the morning after, and they said, you will need surgery eventually. I said, why don't you do it right now? And they said, can we wait until tomorrow morning? I said, yes. And I'm in very good shape.
You didn't have to get in a waiting line like everybody else does?
But I was very lucky because they were not very busy at that moment, and it was kind of emergency. They said they prefer to do that before you have a heart attack than after.
Right.
So the heart is in good shape. So when they saw that the problem was coming, they considered that as an emergency, and in fact, they had a slot at the same time.
Do you think much about, as you get older, about the fact that you're at that stage now where you're going to a hospital?
Oh, someday I will go like anybody else. I know that, but there's no urgency.
No, you're fine right now.
No.
You're on the road, you've got a new book, and I wondered, do former prime ministers have to write a book? Do you feel the need to tell your story?
I wrote a book in 1985, straight from the heart, talking about my career, and it was updated in 1993. So, yes, it's probably good if you can write a book, and mine, I wrote it earlier because I didn't take notes, and I did not write my day. I had enough work, so I did not write what happened in the day. So everything is from memory. So it's better to do that when you still have it fresh in the mind. I was on Rick Mercer's show, you know, I grabbed him by the neck, yes, remember? And,
which is incidentally not the first time you've done that.
No. And I ran up the stairs, and and I've been giving a lot of interviews in English and in French. And last week, same time, I was on my way to Vancouver. So I've been in Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, Ottawa, and
What's it like touring the country as a former prime minister as opposed to a sitting prime minister?
Well, it's easier. People tend to be nice. There's, of course, when you're the prime minister, you always have protesters, but you get used to it, but it's never that pleasant anyway. But I used to be protester myself when I was a kid, so, you know, whenever I was prime minister and there was protest, I would say to myself, Jean, you deserve it, because I had protested. And when I was a student, I was a kind of activist, rebellious young man.
But I wonder, as a prime minister, because you have that background, when you were being protested, I know as a prime minister, a lot of times you can't go out and say, you know what, I agree with you guys. But I'm sure there's a lot of the protesters where you agreed with some of what they were doing.
But, you know, sometimes I'll talk with them. It was not always possible, depends on the pressure, but it's better to talk when you can. Yeah. You know how to trick it? They will have signs, you know, big signs. I will read the signs. Okay, I read it. Put it down. Put it down. So eventually there was no more sign. And I will argue with them a little bit. If you can do that, sometimes as they are very motivated, you know, uptight too much. And the police, when you're prime minister, there's always more danger than when I was a minister.
You had an interesting relationship with your party because you were the prime minister, you were a senior member of that party, and you enjoyed success within the party, and then you enjoyed, you know, problems within the party as well. Were there times when you were, especially near the end?
You know, there's always people who want to take over your job. I'm sure there's some guys who'd like to take over you. The guys in the back are making less money than you. So and they think you're better than you, probably.
Sure.
So,
and they probably are. Here's the thing, though. They can't force me out, right? Whereas for you, you had to deal with that. You was your finance minister.
You know, but I was the leader of the party for 14 years. It's a long time. And I had made up my mind. I was not supposed to run a third term. You know, in my book, I describe all that. I had 2 terms, I thought it would have been enough for me, but circumstances forced me and let my wife to say that, Jean, they're not nice to you. You stay a 3rd term. I gave her a standing ovation.
You ran for a 3rd time to stick it to your rivals in the party?
No, but, you know, there is. I had made plan to go, and that a lot of people wanted me to go. And at the convention in 2000, you know, there was rumor that I might go and so on, and everybody was shouting 4 more years. But I had promised Aline that I was not to stay. And she said to me, she took away my promise. She came back into the room when the people were asking me to stay. I said, no, I promised Aline, I'm leaving. Next year, I'm gone. She went out. Was going back to 24 Sussex because my writing people were there. And she reopened the door, and she shouted 4 more years. She got a standing ovation by everybody, me the first. And, and it led me to my 3rd term, but, you know, it was to be the last, because you have to go at one time.
Do you think you could have won a 4th term?
Everybody tells that to me. Do you think I would?
I don't know. I don't know.
But no, I was. When I quit, it was the party was at 54, 45 in the polls. The closest was 20, 65% approval rate. But of course, you have to understand that it was my decision not to go to war to Iraq, and a lot of Canadians were very happy with that, and we were right not to go, and everybody now think it was a great decision.
Were we close? And I know we all remember that day when you stood up in question period. I remember everybody was gathered around the television set. It was one of those moments where they didn't know how you were going to go. We assumed it was no, but everybody watched with anticipation. Was there ever a chance that the Canadian Army was going to go into Iraq?
Yes, it could have happened. I had discussed that with President Bush in Detroit in August 2002. And I said to him at that time, you know, if you have the support of the UN, we will go. But to get the support of the UN, you will need a better proof on weapon of mass destruction.
What did he say to that?
But he said that he was to go to the UN, but he failed. And some months after that, I met his chief of staff, Andrew Cards. And at a wedding in Ottawa, you know, the ambassador's daughter was marrying a hockey player for the Hurricane of somewhere in the South, and not the Maple Leaf. And that, no, but a nice guy. And I was invited to the wedding, and so I said to him, "Oh, you're pretty mad at me, you guys." And he said, "No." He said, "You told us, you know, a long time. Our problem is we did not believe you. We thought that you were to find a way to be with us. But at least, Mr. Chretien, you did not double-cross us. Others, and I know who did that, promised to them, did not go." But at that time, it was tough because the business community were very nervous. They would say, "Oh, Mr. Chretien, if we say no, you know, they would retaliate against us." And one day I said to representation, I said, "Okay, give me the list of all the goods and all the services that the Americans are buying from us and they don't need." There was no list. Because business is business. And they still need our oil, they still need our gas, they still need our forests.
Water.
No, the water they need it, but we're not selling.
Yeah.
It's going to be a problem for future generation. In a way, the Americans are very envious of us because we have 20% of all the fresh water of the world in Canada. We're very lucky as a country.
Well, the environment is a big issue here, and I know
it's a big issue. And as you know, I signed Kyoto against again, you know.
But we didn't enact it, though. I mean, Canada didn't live up to it.
Could not enact it. I was not there. You know, I had almost a deal with the oil industry when I left. But my 2 successors decided not to proceed for implementation. But I'm not there. I think it's doable. Now, we lost 4 years, so to meet the targets that we had for 2012 will be impossible because we're in 2008, but we lost 4 years.
We're in conversation with the former Prime Minister Jean Chretien, and in fact, we will actually come back and talk about his successors when more of our conversation continues on the hour.
I'm not talking.
That's right, everybody. Let me tell you about the plan for tomorrow. Perhaps you know the book Tuesdays with Maury. If not, you'll hear all you need to hear. It's been 4 years on the bestseller list, and it's been called the most successful memoir in history. The man who wrote it is Mitch Albom, and he'll be here to talk about Maury and his new book for one more day, Mitch Albom, tomorrow on The Hour. We're back here on The Hour with former Prime Minister Jean Chretien, who's got a book, My Years as Prime Minister, with your wife there.
Yeah, she's watching.
Did you make her did she make you put that in the picture?
No, it's a very good picture, you know, you can see that. She was always there. We've been married 50 years in last September.
That's a long time. It's hard to be a successful Prime Minister and a good husband.
But, you know, I love politics. It was a sport for me when I was a kid, and I had told her that, you know, we were getting married, but I'm warning you, someday I will try politics. That was part of the wedding contract, I guess. And people don't realize it's a lot of work. You have to care about your writing, so you go there Saturday morning, I will receive citizens who wanted to see me. I will go to some reception in the afternoon and some organization Sunday morning, and perhaps take an hour or two for skiing. And all the kids are back in the car, and we're going back to Ottawa. And sometimes it's no storm. And we've done it for all my life. And it was, you know, my family was a great support all the time, and it's tough for the family more than for you.
When you're the Prime Minister, though, you can't make that last flight home because you're gone and you're on trips, and like. You know.
Yeah, but the kids were grown up by that time. I would travel on, you've seen the books, with my grandchildren. It was a lot of fun to be with them, because the other leaders didn't have grandchildren of that. You know, they were adults, and at one time, the youngest one was about 14 and 15, and I was in Moscow, and Putin invited me for lunch, but they said, take your grandson with you. So there was President Putin, myself, and my grandson. And after the lunch, we had translator and note takers and so on. When we walk out, President Putin said to Philip, he said, have you ever visited the Kremlin? And Philip said no. So he said, stay with me. So I had to go to a meeting, and he stayed with President Putin, and for about 45 minutes he walked in the Kremlin.
You were okay with that, leaving him in there in the Kremlin?
Yeah, Putin is, you know.
When President Fox was on here, he said Putin kept trying to get him drunk with vodka at every meal.
Yeah, I know, but but I have a story about their vodka. But anyway, to finish the discussion and to finish the story, he stayed there, and after half an hour, 45 minutes, speaking in Russian, Putin said, you know, I'm sorry, but I have to go. And so the translator said, Philip, I'm sorry, I have to go. So Philip shook hands with the translator. He was willing to stay with President Putin.
In your book, you talk about, and Putin is a great way to lead into this, about power. Politics is about power, getting power, keeping power.
But yes, because you get elected. You know, the pleasure of politics is the challenge of politics, is how to survive in politics, to get elected. There's an election in every 3 or 4 or 5 years. You can always lose. After that, you're elected, so you're a bunch of MPs. Everybody wants to be a cabinet minister. So there's a lot of competition to become cabinet minister. So you survive it again, and eventually you become the leader, like happened to me, but it took me 30 years to become the leader.
You've had a lot of great successes, but do you have any regrets about your time, and did the way it
No, on the contrary, I'm very happy with everything happened. I was very happy to make my third term. It was probably my best one, because I was kind of liberated. And there was a lot of controversy in the party about, for example, Kyoto. Those who were candidates were a bit afraid that the oil people will not help them if they are too much for that. For me, I didn't give a damn about it. I was leaving. And so I said yes to Kyoto. And
why do prime ministers always do that in their last term, though? Why don't they do it in their first term, where you can actually implement these things?
You have to do that. I done a lot of things. You know, balancing the books, I did it in my first term. I had to slash a lot of programs and let go a lot of employees. And I thought perhaps I would not survive.
Well, that's what's so interesting about the story is that for a long time it seemed like you and your finance minister and you and Palmer were a great team together. And that's why I think the breakdown seems so colossal.
But the problem is he wanted to be prime minister, and he was impatient. And I bought it fine. But I was a prime minister. I had won the convention. I had won on the first ballot. I had 60% of the vote, and he had 22, 23. So I had, my mandate has been renewed by the party at every leadership review. Mm-hmm. So I had all the legitimacy, and I was winning election. That's pretty important in election.
To win, yes.
Yeah.
How would you have run against Stephen Harper? How would you have run against Stephen Harper? Would you have done things differently than the Liberal Party did?
You know, I don't like to comment about that because, you know, I'm gone and I don't want to be the Monday morning quarterback to anybody else. Of course, I'd like, if I were a younger person, I'd like to take him for a run. But I'm not there.
Stéphane Dion is experiencing a pretty rough ride to start. How do you assess him so far?
But it's a tough job to be in opposition. And I was there too. And you very rarely have good publicity when you're in opposition, but you have to realize that it is the government who lose election less than the opposition winning election. Mm-hmm. And for example, my first election, I think Mr. Mulroney helped me a bit. And a lot. And so that's, but after that I won my 2 other elections. You know, do you remember it was Kim Campbell, but it was the legacy of the Conservative Party at the time.
Do you talk to, as a member of the Liberal Party, do you talk to Stéphane Dion and his...
Yes, once in a while, not too often. I think it's inappropriate to become the mother-in-law. You know, let him decide. Yeah. He calls me once in a while. He asked me a question. I replied with great pleasure. But I don't want to be... You know, he has to be his own man. He's a very intelligent person, very hardworking person. He was an excellent minister for me, and you know, he was a very good minister of the environment. But he has a different personality.
That day, October 30th, when you know, the day of the referendum, how scared were you?
But I was, you know, what happened? It's happened during the old campaign. We were doing very well. And suddenly, about 2 weeks before, 20 days before the vote, more or less, Parizeau resigned and was replaced by Bouchard. And it's something that never happened in the middle of a race that you have a new leader. And as he had lost a leg and, you know, when it was a dramatic encounter, you know, he came back and some thought he was a kind of savior. And he was telling them, he said that he was the negotiator of a new deal. You know, there was a question of 60 words. Do you agree with an agreement between 3 guys and blah, 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 you know? Nobody.
But that was the question they faced.
So now I said in the law, the question would have to be, do you want to separate from Canada, yes or no? Yeah. This is clear, there's no ambiguity. The rest is we will divorce and remain married at the same time. It's not working like that.
But that's the question that they face. And I remember watching that broadcast that night. I was watching the National, and I was scared. When you were watching the results come in, were you scared?
But I knew it was to be very tight because the polls were there. But I said that, you know, yeah, I was unhappy, but there's not much you can do. So when you're in a situation like that, you have to remain very calm.
Outwardly, yes, but inwardly, how did you feel?
Yeah, but to be calm, you have to be calm yourself inside, too.
Thanks for your time. It's good to see you.
My pleasure.
Former Prime Minister Jean Chretien, everybody. Lots more to come on tonight's edition of The Hour. I'll be right back.